Hello, everyone. I'm Eji Bilik, the founder of selfpublishingmastery.com, and I welcome you to a new episode of the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks. Today, I'm thrilled to have a very special guest. He's an amazing and accomplished digital marketing, self-publishing, and social media expert. He's also a seasoned speaker and sought-after speaker at writers' conferences such as the San Francisco Writers Conference, the Writers Digest Writers Conference, and even Book Expo America, to name just a few. And last but not least, among his many other achievements and roles he's the president of the Author Learning Center, which is one of my favorite learning hubs, one of my favorite websites for authors, where actually you can find all the tools, all the knowledge you need to advance your writer's career, no matter where you are. So I'm sure you want to know who this amazing person is. Without any further ado, I'm saying and I'm welcoming Mr. Keith Ogorek. Hello, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, AJ. I always look forward to being able to share with aspiring and accomplished authors, and I appreciate you making some time for me to do that today.
Oh, we appreciate you having making time for us to be here with us today and sharing with us your knowledge. I know we went through the topics a little bit before our conversation. So actually today you're going to hear a lot of very useful insights from Keith on how you can be a successful author in 2019, because the self-publishing and publishing world is constantly changing. So we need to keep up to date with the trends and with how things are evolving. But before that, I have a question, because I know you've done marketing, you have a Bachelor of Science in Business, in Advertising and Marketing. So you have this background. So how did you transition from that into the world of publishing and self-publishing, and then helping authors?
Right. So that's a really great question. And as you noted, I actually worked for ad agencies for a number of years, and then in different roles in marketing. And what I found when I started working with authors is that marketing was something that they know they needed to do, but it was very confusing and very overwhelming. And so one of the things that I helped do, which we have available on the Author Learning Center, is created a really simple acronym for authors to understand how marketing needs to work when they think about their book. And the acronym is this: it's POEM. And the P stands for publicity, the O stands for online, the E stands for event, and the M stands for multimedia. And what I try and help authors understand is every integrated campaign is going to include elements from one of those categories. And so what you want to do is you want to at least have a checklist and say, okay, what am I going to do from a publicity standpoint? What am I going to do from an online standpoint? What am I going to do from an event standpoint? What am I going to do from multimedia? Some of the things you may be able to do yourself, some of the things that you may be able to do by hiring other people or working with the publisher that you're working with. The other thing that's valuable about having that framework, and I've had the opportunity to present it multiple times at writers' conferences as well as at the Author Learning Center, is when you have that framework, it helps you maximize your efforts. So for example, when an author is going to do a book signing, a lot of times authors will do a book signing and that will be the event. But when you understand this POEM method of book marketing, what you realize is there's things that you can do before the event, there's things you can do at the event, and there's things you can do after the event, all in this category of publicity, online, events, and multimedia. And so you take something that is one point in time, which is a book signing or a book launch event, and you turn it into this campaign. And both in the webinar that I teach, which is recorded for members on the ALC, as well as the handout that you get, I explain that. And we have some authors that have just done a masterful job of taking this one little event and appearing to be ubiquitous. So they do things ahead of time, they do things at the event, they take videos, they'll take pictures of books. They'll take pictures of people who buy their books with them, and they'll ask them to post on social media. Then afterwards, they post that on their website. So there's a lot that you can do when you have this simple framework. And what I've come to realize is it actually helps authors not feel as overwhelmed by it. And it helps them have a framework to make sure that they're maximizing their efforts.
Oh, this sounds amazing. And I already have a tons of other questions coming to my mind. So, okay, let me, so first of all, where can we learn more about your methods? So let's say for people who for some reason they cannot go to writers' conferences to see you, so they can become a member of the Author Learning Center. And
Right. So let me explain a little bit. I appreciate the introduction you made on the Author Learning Center. So, for all the years I've worked with authors, and you cited some of the conferences I've spoken at, I've had thousands of conversations with authors, and what I realized is that having an idea for a book is really easy. Starting to write a book is pretty easy, but writing a good book to the finish and knowing how to market it is one of the more difficult tasks that anyone can accomplish. And so what we realize is that there's lots of information out there, but information alone isn't enough. So we created the Author Learning Center with a unique combination of expert advice and interviews, as well as unique author-inspired tools. So we have something called the Book Launch Tool, and we have something called the Author Circle. And the Book Launch Tool is a tool to help you map your journey. And that's why we often talk about the ALC as a GPS for your publishing journey. So if you think about a GPS and how it works, or an app on your phone, the first thing you do is you put in your destination of where you're going to go. Then the second thing you do is you put where you're going to start. And then your GPS maps your journey for you. And this is really important because when you're going along the way, you think about it, GPS doesn't tell you everything you need to know. It tells you what you need to know at each step of the way. And you had made reference to this, but we look at tasks that you need to accomplish in the writing, editing, publishing, and marketing phase. And so we make sure that you have the right kind of advice at the right time to help you continue to move along in your journey. And we're so sure it's going to help that it's a free trial. It's a 30-day free trial, and it's $9.99 a month after that. So it's like Netflix. Actually, now it's cheaper than Netflix. But what it does for an author is it gives them the unique advice from experts, connections, community, and tools to help them get to their goal. The best way I've had someone describe it to me is it's Netflix meets LinkedIn meets Fitbit for authors. And I didn't come up with that, but I really like that description. So on the Author Learning Center, I've taught this POEM method of book marketing. So you can go on, you can register, set up an account, and you can access any of our recorded webinars. I think we're approaching 200 different recorded webinars that you get full access to as a member. So you just go on Author Learning Center and search POEM method of book marketing, or search my name, and you'll find a webinar there.
Thank you. That's amazing. Yeah, and I've been part of the Author Learning Center as a panelist, as a speaker. I'm honored to be part of this amazing community and team, and I enjoy watching the other experts' webinars as well, because there is a ton of great information there. And if you just apply only, let's say, 10% of what you learn, then your career is going to get a boost. That's guaranteed. So that's amazing.
Yeah, if there's two other things I could add, I thought both of these things were interesting. A few weeks ago, I was meeting with one of the CEOs of one of the traditional publishers, and he was asking me a number of questions about the Author Learning Center. He had looked at it, and he made a statement. He said, I believe that you do more to educate authors about book marketing than any other company in the world, because there's so much information that's helpful. The other thing is, you had mentioned writers' conferences. A few years ago, I was given an opportunity. Well, I'll speak at writers' conferences, but this one had asked, would I take 5 minutes at breakfast and just tell them about the Author Learning Center? And I said, okay, 5 minutes. And actually, they said 3. So I thought, what am I going to say? So I stood up in front of the audience, which had probably 500 people there, and I said, tell me what questions you're here at the conference to get answered. And people raised their hands. Some people said, I'd like to know how to get an agent. I want to understand what editing does. I want to understand social media. And I looked at them and I said, you know what? I am reasonably confident you're going to get your question answered at this conference, because this is a great conference, a lot of great faculty, a lot of experts. But let me ask you a question a month from now when you have a question. where are you going to get your answer? And 2 months from now, when you have a question you didn't even know you would have, where are you going to get your answer? That's where the Author Learning Center comes in, because it has both expert advice and community that helps you get the answers to your questions. And I have a myriad and myriad and myriad of examples of that, where people get stuck, or they have a question and it was either something from the experts or someone from the community that gives them an idea that moves them along.
I'm curious to know how the author's attitude changed towards education since you started the Author Learning Center and until now. I mean, are people more aware of their need to actually understand this whole process and to understand the book marketing, even though they decide to hire someone to do it?
Yes. So it's funny. We just interviewed one of our members for a testimonial, and she had actually been a published author, self-published for a while. And what she said is she didn't realize how many mistakes she had been making, but how easy it was to correct them. And so what we find is there's sort of two categories of people. There's people who have been doing things for a certain while, but not necessarily getting the result that they want. And then the second thing is that there's people who have no idea what to do. And both of them find the Author Learning Center helpful to them because it helps them move along in their process. And I thought that was a really interesting, transparent disclosure when this woman said, oh, I've been making a lot of mistakes, but now I know what those mistakes are, and now I know how to correct them. And so she's very grateful for the opportunity that she had on the Author Learning Center. And the reality is this business, I was just talking to someone today. I was talking to an author who had been traditionally published. And, you know, I like to say that publishing didn't change much for 500 years, from Gutenberg up until about 2000. And then it's gone through the most radical set of changes in 15 years or 18 years than it had in the first 500 years. And so it's important as an author and a book marketing person that you stay in touch with how things are changing. There are some fundamental things that haven't changed. You know, the most important marketing decision you have to make is write a really good book, you know, that has a very clearly defined audience, because I would tell you that no matter what you do, and there are some really powerful tools that we have available, I still believe one of the most powerful marketing methods is word of mouth. I'm going to read a book. My wife and I, just before I jumped on this thing, there's a book that she's read, and she said, you know, I think you would really enjoy this book. My wife's got a great knack for books and literary stuff. And if she says I should read it, I'm going to read it. So that's what you want to do, is you want to make sure that your book is so good that someone says you need to read this book. And there's a lot of books still sold by word of mouth.
Yeah, I totally agree to that. And in my webinars, I also tell people about the word of mouth as being probably the most powerful marketing tool out there. And
it is.
Yeah, and also, yeah, you definitely need a great book, but then maybe you can start the word of mouth process somehow. So that's something to consider.
Yeah.
Where do you think, as I said, so many questions coming in. So going back a little bit to your poem, to the acronym.
Right.
So what do you recommend an author to do before the event? So what would be
So one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure you send out invitations, so you're going to have people there, and then you want to make sure that you're posting on social media that this event is coming. Depending on where you're holding the event, if you're holding it yourself, you want to make sure that you have payment methods so that you can take payment. I can't tell you how many authors show up and they don't have a square for their phone, or they didn't bring enough cash, and you know, you want, and so they lose opportunities, right? And some people want to pay cash, some people want to do that. If you're doing it through a store, you want to make sure that the store understands what you're doing to promote the event. And then it's really important, and this is the thing that most people don't do. When they're at the event, make sure you take photos. There's a presenter that we have on the Author Learning Center. His name is Doug Gardam. He's an author. He's probably secured 300 book signings, both in the US and Canada. And we have him do a webinar on how to get book signings. And Doug is amazing, because what he does is everyone who comes to his book signing, he tries to take a picture with him as the author and them holding the book next to him. And he asks them to share on their social media. So he's built this huge Twitter following. and a much much bigger email address or much bigger email list as a result. So those are things that you can do ahead of time. I find that most people think about the event, but they don't think about at the event, and they miss opportunities. And then, I mean, take some photos. I mean, take it from an angle. I mean, if you have 5 people in line, take that photo, because that will help you secure your next book signing, right?
Right.
So there's just all kinds of opportunities. And again, I would direct back to the poem method. It really helps you just think, I should take photos. I should post those on my website. And then send it out to everyone afterwards and say, thank you for coming, right? I mean, and feel free, remind them, here's a link to the book that you can buy on Amazon or wherever. So.
From your experience with working with authors and, of course, your background as an ad man,
Right.
what is the role that traditional media currently plays in the development of a writer's career, especially when it comes to first-time authors who don't have nobody knows about them.
Right. So traditional advertising is much tougher these days. Those media channels are harder. I mean, newspapers have shrunk, magazines have shrunk, television is much tougher. So those are things that I would say. Now, from a PR standpoint, there are a number of local papers that are always interested in a local angle. So one of the ways that first-time authors can take advantage of it is really understand what their pitch is, their pitch about their book and the pitch to an angle. So you can, I've just seen a number of authors, be successful at getting in their local paper by talking about themselves as a local resident, publishing a book, and what their plans are. It's obviously a little bit harder to get on national media unless you have a book that's sort of relevant to what's going on in the national media, or if you have a unique hook to your book. But I will tell you, and I said this earlier, and I know you would agree with this. One of the things that sometimes prevents authors from getting interviews is they get interests, but they have mistakes in their book, or their book doesn't hold together. That's why I can't emphasize enough how important it is to write a really good book and take the time to invest in editing. I've heard from many publicists and many people in the media is they'll get a reader copy of the book, they'll flip it over, and there are mistakes on the back cover. They don't even crack the cover at that point. So, but again, I think as you build momentum, and I would point you back to Doug on the Author Learning Center. He just does a masterful job of talking about how you prepare and get ready for these kinds of things.
Since you mentioned these errors and all kind of mistakes that we find in some books, obviously we are talking about self-published books because traditional publishers, they make
Correct.
sure this would never happen. So
Correct.
we all know that nowadays, basically with Amazon and the internet, anyone can self-publish a book, but then who should self-publish a book and when? Right.
So it's kind of the good, what I always say is it's the best time in history to be an author, and it's the worst time in history to be an author. And it's the best time in history to be an author because the traditional gates that kept you from putting your story and your writing into the hands of readers have now been taken down by self-publishing. But it's also the worst time to be an author because now there's so much content out there that it's hard to stand out from the crowd. So what I would say is the person who should self-publish is someone who is motivated not to make money. That's the reason not to self-publish, because the reality is even traditionally published authors, it's hard to just only make money from your writing. But if you have something to say that will help people, if you believe you have, and it can be, genre isn't important here. It can be a cookbook. Mm-hmm. It can be, a book on how to use natural eating to overcome cancer. It can be financial planning. It can be how to manage. I mean, there's so many things. That's a really strong reason to do that. A second reason is if you have a story that you want to make sure gets preserved or shared. And that could be a local story. I mean, I've got so many examples of that. There's an author that I know that he's a lawman in Texas, and he wrote a story about this particular controversial case that took place in the 1920s. And I just learned over the last couple months that he got an option for that to be developed as a movie. So there's a story to be preserved. The third reason is if you have a business or a ministry, a book can give you significant credibility. It will make a big difference if you have a consulting practice or a speaking practice or some kind of ministry. Those are the three main reasons I think someone should actually take the time to self-publish. If you just like to write, that's probably okay. But the reality is when you write your book, you should think about what impact is this going to have in the life of people. And so it can be fiction, it can be poetry. That's why genre is not important. To me, it's not as important. It's what's your motivation for doing that. And I think if you are coming from one of those motivations, and I will tell you that part of the reasons why I talk about this motivations is the authors I've seen that are successful were motivated by one of those things. And then they were willing, the other thing is they were willing to do the hard work to make the book a good story, make it good writing. So I have a perfect example. There's an Author Learning Center member. He's actually he's on our testimonial page. And there was a book he's wanted to write for 18 years. A number of years ago, he and his wife went through a tragedy where they lost a 13-year-old son. And he'd seen just a number of things that actually came out of that were good. And he thought he really just wanted to record what he had written in a book. And he'd never written a book before. He was actually like an accounting guy. And so he joined the Author Learning Center and he wrote his first draft. And it was, quite frankly, not a very good story. He had gotten all the facts right, but it sort of read as an audit report, right? Yeah. And part of the advice that I gave him is you have to tell it like it's a story. So you have to create an inciting action, which all good stories have an exciting. It's a memoir, it's a teaching memoir, but you still have to make it good writing. And what was interesting is he took the criticism well. And then the day that his son passed, which is 18 years ago, there was really some dramatic events that happened around that. And one of the phrases that I had heard from an editor years ago, which I've borrowed multiple times, I wish I could remember who to attribute it to, is take me into the room, make me fit. And so he did the hard work and he did another draft. And I will tell you that first chapter, so, I was in his author circle and I read that first chapter and I couldn't read the rest of it. He had done such a masterful job of making you feel what was happening in that room, and it made you want to read the rest of the book. The other thing is that he wrote with all the senses. Like, I said, tell me what it smells like. Tell me what I hear. Don't just give me the facts. And to write that way takes work, right? It takes work. And I was honestly blown away. And it was funny. It took him about 14 months to really get his manuscript done. And he told me later, because we interviewed him for a testimonial, he said his wife has watched him and she's decided after what she saw him go through, she will never, ever write a book in her life because it was so much work. But he was so committed to writing a good book. And he's had such great joy in terms of the feedback he's gotten from the book. And I had an opportunity a few months ago to do a book signing. He was actually in our area and he invited me to come and talk about the Author Learning Center and how it helped him. And he said, tell him what you said after my first draft. And, I told him, and I said, but he was willing to do the good work. And now he's experienced the joy of being an author, but he will tell you that he had the facts right, but his story wasn't good. And I see too many authors that just want to get the facts down on paper and they don't tell a good story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And as a writer, I can relate to what you're saying as well. Yeah. But I admit that you made me, now I want to read this book. Yeah. Honestly, like word of mouth. Look how it, yeah. I heard you talking about it so passionately. Yeah. I want to read it now. So that's what you need to do, dear viewers, with your books. Like have someone talk as passionately as Mr. Ogorek did about this book, about your book, and I think your battle is won that way. How can we take this phrase, get me, what was it? Get me in,
Take me into the room.
Take me into the room. How can we apply it to our digital marketing campaigns? Because I think that when we tell a story, even through our marketing, we have better chances at standing out and engaging people.
Right. So that's a great question. I will tell you that the digital part is a method, but the most important thing for any marketing person to understand is who their audience is. So one of the things that I do on the Author Learning Center, in fact, we're about to relaunch it on Wednesday. We have done what we call a group coaching program, where we do a 3-month, 90-day group coaching program. And one of the things I say is that you have to actually write a description of your audience. And if the answer of who your audience is every man, woman, and child on the planet, you are not going to be successful. And so I ask you to do 2 things. Write a description and then tell me where they hang out. Where do they hang out physically and where do they hang out digitally? And when you have that clarity around where you're going to, who your audience is for your book, and where you can find them, it allows you to focus your messaging and focus your both digitally and practically. And I have so many examples of that. One of my best examples, or one of my favorite examples, is there was a woman, an author, who had written some historical fiction books that were set in Ireland. And so she decided to test. She went to an Irish festival and got a table for a very cheap price. Sold hundreds of books, because she thought about, okay, this is Ireland. People who are Irish heritage might be interested in this book. Mm-hmm. And so she, I mean, I joked with her. I said, gosh, you get to hang out at an Irish festival for the weekend and write it off as a business expense? That's quite a deal. But practically then, if her book is any good, those people are going to take that book, they're going to read it, and they're going to go tell someone else about it. And I have a lot of examples of the best examples of people is they really define who their audience is. And then digitally, they can reach those people. You can find them, on different platforms. And one of the things I really encourage authors to do is don't try and be everywhere. Figure out where the people who are interested in your books hang out. It could be Pinterest. It could be LinkedIn. It could be Twitter. It could be, because I've seen this. I mean, there are some people that, depending on the age that you're doing, it could be Instagram, right? Chances are, if you're writing a book about, how to enjoy retirement, Instagram is probably not going to be the place you want that book to be. But Facebook might be, right? So those are the things. But the biggest problem I see that most authors do is they don't have a clear picture who their audience is. And that's why I think that's really important.
So can you please give us a few pointers on how to actually find your audience? Because people, they might say, okay, but I don't have the money, I'm not a big company to put money into a market research. So how can they find out? Where should they go?
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, a lot of social media platforms have groups, right? So if you have a book around, there's a book that I saw recently, a woman had some kids with food allergies, right? So you search social media platforms, not around your book title, but around the core thing that your book is trying to communicate, And there's so many different groups out there, and that's the place you start. Because remember, if your book is good, it doesn't matter what the story is or what the genre is. Someone's gonna tell someone, you need to read this book. This is a good book. This book will impact you. And so the beauty of digital marketing is you don't need to do research, in the sense that the platform helps you. The platform wants to help you connect on that. Goodreads is another place where you can do that. So Goodreads, Facebook, Pinterest, all these places, if you just put in your search term, you'll find that. Same thing on blog platforms like WordPress and Blogspot. If you put in the keywords by which your book would be identified, chances are you can find reviewers there, you can find people there. So that's the easiest thing. That's what makes the digital world really great.
At the beginning of our conversation, I was saying that we are going to talk about how authors can be successful in 2019. And since we are talking about marketing, digital marketing, what do you think are the most efficient marketing tools this year?
Yes. So I still think Goodreads is a really great platform for authors to be on that platform, because that's where a lot of the readers are. And so you need to do that. And then I think other social media platforms based on your genre, right? So if you have a YA book, Instagram is probably better than Facebook, right? Because younger kids tend to be on Instagram. So understanding your audience and then focusing on one platform, I think, is really important. One of the interesting things is, we continue to see traditional retailers struggle, other than independents. In the Christian genre, Lifeway just decided to close their stores at the end of the year. That takes a lot of retail space out of the inventory. Mm-hmm. So it becomes even more important for authors to do that and find those things. But those are the platforms. I think if you look at Goodreads, this is the predominant platform for readers, and then you look at social media where you search and find your audiences. I think those are the two biggest trends. The other thing is YouTube can be a very effective place if you're consistent in your video there.
Yeah. Okay. So more. So the writer nowadays is not just a writer who writes books, but it's also a content producer. So
Correct.
when you embark on this journey, and so this goes both for traditional and self-published authors.
Correct. Yeah. One of the biggest fallacies out there is if I'm a traditionally published author, the traditional publisher will do everything. In fact, that's not true. They want you to be out there, because in the end, when someone reads a book, they really want to meet the author. And so, if you know anything about Book Expo America, it's traditionally been the biggest trade show in the U.S. Mm-hmm. for book business. But what they've done is they've added 2 days on the weekend called BookCon, which mm-hmm. is where authors can meet readers, and it's just huge. It's huge, and so it's because one of the advantages of an event like that is I actually get to meet the author, and we still want to do that. We still want to connect, at a human level with people.
Can you give us an insight on what's going on in the traditional publishing industry right now, and also how it's going to evolve both industries, traditional and self-publishing? Where do you see them going in the second half of the year? Because we are almost in June. I mean,
yeah. So let me start with traditional publishing. So there's a couple things in traditional publishing. First of all, I think it's very, very important to remind people that publishing will always remain as an industry, because as long as we have been on this earth, we have wanted to capture and preserve our stories. It started with people drawing things in the cave. It started with scribes in Gutenberg's press. And so traditional publishing is still trying to find the next great story, the story that captivates our heart or that takes us somewhere else or that helps us. And so they're still as committed as ever. The challenge they have is the traditional retail bookstore has changed dramatically, and Amazon has become more and more of a force. So as an industry, they're trying to figure out how to go more direct to the consumer, but not alienate Amazon. So that's a big part of it. The second part of it is I think they're getting much more data-driven and analytically driven. So they're trying to figure out, how do you find the person who's most interested in this particular book? But I can tell you, just again, because of the great privilege I have and where I sit, when I talk to traditional publishers, they're as passionate as ever about books. They're as passionate as ever about finding the next great writer. They're as passionate as ever as watching self-published books for that opportunity. Mm-hmm. But they've just got some challenges. The other thing I would say, there's one other development, is I think, the explosion of content in streaming services has created a greater opportunity more than ever for traditional publishers to see their content being developed for these streaming platforms. There's statistics that I have access to. The FX Network's research said that in 2012, there's like 186 scripted shows produced in Hollywood. And last year, I think there was over 500. So, where are they going to get those ideas? Well, there's only 3 places you can come up with an original idea for a show. You can either come up with an original idea, you can do a remake, which is why we got Baywatch the movie, or you can get the idea from a book. And Hollywood loves books right now, and so that's good. Now, from a self-published standpoint, there really hasn't been. A few years ago, there was a consolidation of self-publishing companies, and some went out of business. But right now, there's been stability, so for self-publishing, I think there's a couple things. One, it's become easier and easier to get your books into the hands of readers. But that means, as we said at the beginning, there's a lot of people who are doing it, and some of them are not that good. The second thing is ebooks have slowed, and so it's important that you be in ebooks, but you also need to make sure that your books are available in print and available through print on demand. Audiobooks have jumped both in traditional and self-published authors, and I would say traditional publishers are a little bit ahead of the curve on audiobooks, but self-published authors are trying to figure out how to play in that space, and there's some companies rising up to help them. And then the last thing, much like I said with traditional publishers, I think the opportunity for Hollywood to adapt self-published books has never been greater. Now, they probably won't be theatrical releases. They could be streaming services. But I have some statistics that say last year between Netflix, Amazon, Apple, HBO, and I think one other one, they invested over $20 billion in new content. So, I mean, there's a lot of money looking for ideas. And movie studios are looking for them, but because the problem is you have something like Avengers Endgame, it makes $2 billion, but it costs hundreds of millions to produce, and there's a lot of examples in Hollywood where they've spent $250 million on a movie and it makes $70 million bucks. But they might be able to find a great story in a self-published book, and it might cost them $5 to $7 million to produce. There was a movie out. It wasn't based on a book, but it was based on a song called "I Can Only Imagine," and you can look it up on IMDb or whatever. And I think they produced it for $7 million bucks, and I haven't looked in a while, but it did somewhere between $70 and $100 million at the box office. Well, you don't need to be very good at math to figure out that's a very profitable movie, right? And what made it a great movie, it was a very good story. It was an independently produced film. It was a great story. It was well produced. It was drawn from a song that a lot of people were familiar with, and and obviously made the producers and directors and investors a very tidy return. So.
Yeah, that's amazing, and lots of opportunities for authors right now, as you said, and that's one more reason to be to give your best when you write your book, and then when you self-publish it, to make sure that everything is like really professional and the way it should be.
Yep.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's been a really amazing conversation. I would like to know what's coming up for the Author Learning Center during the second half of the year. So a couple things. One, we're going to continue to offer weekly webinars that you can sample. You do not need to be a member to do that. But the biggest thing is we have tested this group coaching program where what it is you sign up for 90 days and you get a instructional webinar at the beginning of the month, and at the end of the month you have a coaching webinar where you get to, through a technology like this, like GoToSeminar, you get to raise your hand and share what's your elevator pitch, what's your audience, and then get some feedback on that. And we believe there's a real opportunity down the road. So we've got one that's launching. It's a marketing one. It's launching on Wednesday, and we believe over the course of the next, between now and the end of the year, we'll be launching other programs, because this format seems to work really well. And then we're going to make other things. We're changing our homepage and doing some other things, but otherwise that's the big opportunity. And we believe there's no other organization doing that. Not only do we have the most content and the best tools, but no one else is offering that kind of opportunity. And I know from my experience with being a presenter that you actually you have members from all over the world, not just the U.S. So that's an opportunity for authors to connect with authors from around the world.
Yeah, we actually have members from 121 countries which is fascinating. So, and you've been a presenter. I've really enjoyed, just even a few months ago, I was on a webinar and there was someone from Denmark and someone from New Zealand and someone from the UK and someone from the Caribbean. Yeah, it's really, again, I'm biased, but it's a platform that allows you to get feedback in a way that no one else offers you. So it's great.
And I second every word you say, because I experienced it. So I know how it works and how it feels.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We wish you good luck and all the best with your career and with Author Learning Center. And we hope we will have you again on our Self-Publishing Mastery vlog soon with more news and more useful insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to doing this again.